Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain. And he was transfigured before them, shining like the sun. And suddenly there appeared Moses and Elijah talking with him. Let's pause right there, before Peter and his companions interrupt the conversation. Because that is what is happening here on the mountaintop, a conversation, a dialogue between Jesus and two Jewish prophets. That's the event occurring here. The radiance, the supernatural transfiguration, that's just the stage lighting. Or, taken more seriously, it is the visible manifestation of an intense spiritual resonance. In a truly deep conversation, in a meeting not just of minds, but of souls, in a connection between real, whole persons, there is sometimes this intensity that is almost a physical resonance. To borrow a phrase from another Bible story about another conversation with Jesus, our hearts glow within us. When I was young, I don't know if anyone else does this. When I was younger, I used to experience a literal physical resonance in those moments. I like a sort of vibrating hum inside my chest whenever a conversation got real and truly connected with my soul. So I wonder if that is not what is happening here in this story from Matthew. I think Jesus is here engaged in a dialogue so resonant that even the bystanders pick up the shockwaves. This conversation is on fire. And who are the ones in such deep conversation? Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. The latter two were, of course, long dead. Yet here they are. Moses, leader of the Exodus, Elijah, prophet of the exile, immersed in conversation with Jesus of Nazareth. Because as any reader knows, death need not be an obstacle to the connection of hearts and minds. Centuries of Christians have interpreted this moment on the mountain as a sort of spiritual passing of the baton from the Jewish prophets to Jesus. An indication that from now on, the law and the prophets can retire, replaced by the gospel. But Matthew's story describes no passing of the mantle from Elijah to Jesus, no passing of the staff from Moses to Christ. In Matthew's version of the Nativity story, that's the story of the Magi, they pay homage to Jesus. But here, in another chapter of the same gospel, there is no bowing down. Matthew's narrative here emphasizes instead this continuity, this resemblance, this resonance between Jesus and the prophets. There is no suggestion here of retirement or replacement, only of relationship. The three figures are in conversation, in dialogue. One can only imagine how deep the connection might be between these three. So I think the story is indeed a revelation of the relationship between Jesus and the prophets, between the gospel community and the covenant community, between Christianity and Judaism. But it is a relationship not of conflict, not condemnation, not conversion, but conversation. Not replacement of one by the other, but deep resonance and respect. Tragically, Christians throughout the centuries have failed to follow Jesus' model here in their interactions with Judaism and with their Jewish siblings. Sure of our own superiority, unshakable in our convictions, how many opportunities have we Christians, including myself, how many opportunities have we missed for connection, for resonance, for transfiguration? And how much harm have we therefore inflicted on our spiritual next of kin? I knew a young born-again Christian. Not me. I'm not doing one of those, like, I had a friend. This is one I actually knew. I knew a young born-again Christian who told me she was careful about what she read because she didn't want any wrong ideas to enter her mind. She had been led to believe that faith precluded any dialogue that might produce any movement or response in her own belief. This was many years ago, and I hope that she later found a mentor who could show her, as one of my own mentors did, that the opposite of faith is not doubt. In fact, the opposite of faith is certainty. Because faith is a living thing. It requires an open heart, not a closed mind. Last week I told you that I've been reading a book by a philosopher named Hartmut Rosa called The Uncontrollability of the World. And his thesis, I'm going to quote him here, is that the basic mode of vibrant human existence consists not in exerting control over things or people, but in resonating with them. And that resonance demands that I allow myself to be called, that I be affected, that something reaches me from the outside. Or as the psalmist put it in fewer words, unclench and know that I am God. Now to the second part of today's story. Peter says to Jesus, Lord, it's good that we are here. If you wish, I will set up 3 tents here, 3 booths, 3 tabernacles, if you will. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. I'm going to digress here into a little story. On my recent visit to San Francisco, my daughter and I took advantage of a brief spell of sun, and we went down to the Palace of Fine Arts. This is a beautiful structure of columns and arches surrounding a tranquil pond with ducks and geese. It was built for the Panama Pacific Exposition of 1915, and it now has no other purpose other than to provide an oasis, a moment of peace and beauty in the midst of the city. We were there on a weekday, so it was relatively uncrowded, but there were a number of visitors, tourists like ourselves, maybe 2 dozen. Fully half of them, I'm not exaggerating, fully half of them were standing with their backs to the view, facing the road, while the other half looked through their phones to take pictures of the first half. No one was actually looking directly at the pond or the arches. No one was savoring the moment as it passed because they were too busy, preserving the moment for future reference. So to riff on that word preserves for a moment, we all know that strawberry jam is one thing, but a fresh-picked, field-ripened strawberry is another. Although the jam lasts longer. But I would suggest if any of us actually love the jam more, it is maybe because we love the time we spent making that jam and how we learned it from a friend or a parent or a grandparent. We remember the time just like we remember the time we picked the strawberries. The story from Matthew's Gospel is called the Transfiguration. And the Transfiguration, I think, reveals the tension between time, which cannot be grasped, and objects or territory, which can. speaks with the prophets, speech being something that flows, that exists in time, like music or dance. And the disciples behold a transformation, again, an event that's something that happens in time. And Peter's response is to claim the territory by building some sort of structure on the spot where it happened. That is an absolute primordial human response. It is very natural to mark the spot, to enshrine the thin place where heaven touched earth for us, the spot where the Spirit spoke to us. We build a cairn, we install a plaque, we take a photograph so we can capture the event. But when Peter offers to build something there, Jesus says, no, let's just get going. Jesus, in fact, never built a shrine, unlike most of his biblical ancestors. He never built an altar. He never set up a marker. He never stayed very long in one place. He refused Peter's offer of a tent even, and when he visited the temple in Jerusalem, he predicted that it would fall one day. There's a difference between being transfigured and being transfixed. When a caterpillar changes into a butterfly, it is transfigured. When we capture the butterfly and pin it in a box, it is transfixed. The first is an event which we can only encounter. The second is an object which we can acquire. We can grasp the object in our hand, but it will never surprise us. Not the way a living butterfly can. And as my new literary friend Hartman Rosa notes, our efforts to preserve resonant encounters inevitably fail. Because when we try to take them out of time, we end up paralyzing them. And when we treat our faith as a territory to be defended, we turn it into something else altogether. And so we open our hands again, and we open our hearts again. And we hear again the ancient words that invite us. Unclench your hands, be still. Know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still.